You're listening to Crossroads Church with Pastors Marcus and Natalie Avalos. The following message was recorded live at our Sunday morning services. For more information, go to www.crossroadsc.com. And now prepare your hearts as we receive this morning's message.
My gift to bring this week, we're going to be talking about something that I really believe is kind of the dividing line between what makes somebody who's a Christian who shows up at church on Sunday and then goes out and lives the rest of the week and just kind of lives, versus the people who show up on Sunday and then go out and then they actually live a life that's an overcoming life where they're always just seeing growth and they're seeing things get stronger in their relationships and stronger in their finances. There's a dividing line, and I've been hanging out in the church for about 40 years, and this is the one thing that I've seen as the dividing line that we're going to talk about today. But I want to start off by telling you a story. When I was I had just graduated college, and throughout college, I had a really great job working at Southwest Airlines at the airport in San Antonio. Been there 7 years, was starting to actually make some pretty good money there. And I felt like God was calling me to go on the mission field. I was going to be going on leading teams to China and to Latin America. But to do that, I'd have to quit my job, my good, nice salary that I was finally getting after 7 years. They were finally starting to pay me a little bit closer to what I was worth. But I finally had to quit my job and then raise money as a missionary to go on the field. So I remember turning in my resignation notice. I gave him a month notice, and I remember my boss called me in and he said, "Hey, so what are you leaving to do?" And I was like, "I'm going to go be a missionary." And he's like, "How are you going to pay for that?" I was like, "Oh, people are going to give." He kind of looked at me and goes, "Oh, and what if they don't? I can't give you your job back once you leave." And I remember fear just coming over me at that time, like, everything was great until like reality hit. And I started getting a little nervous, but fortunately, I had been saving up money for quite a while, because in my mind, I never would have said this out loud. I thought, well, if God doesn't provide, at least I can provide for myself, right? I was less spiritual back then. But I remember thinking, I've got this, and I had socked away $5,000, which is more money than I'd ever had in my entire life. I was just saving and saving and saving because I thought, man, I'm single. I can live for like a year on that if God doesn't provide, right? If people don't give. So I had my little nest egg and everything was going good. I felt pretty confident going on the mission field because even if God didn't provide, I could provide for myself, which is a horrible way to look at the world, by the way, but we'll go into that in a minute. But I remember a friend of mine, he called me and said, "Hey, you want to go on a road trip? You're about to leave on the mission field and I won't see you very much. You want to go on a road trip with me up to Dallas? We're going to go to this Bible school graduation." And I was like, "Yeah, who's graduating?" He said, "You don't know who's the guy graduating, but just come with me and it'll be time for us to hang out in the car." So I was like, all right, let's do it. So I drove up there with him, sitting at this big Bible school graduation. There's all these people there. I don't know anybody graduating. I'm just there to hang out with my friend. And the founder of the Bible school, she gets up and she says, "Hey, I feel like there's 10 people in this room who need to give $1,000 to this ministry." And I remember my heart just sank. I was like, oh no. I think I'm supposed to be one of those people. But this is a very bad time to be giving away money. And I just knew in my heart I was supposed to do it. So I jumped up and ran out of the building as fast as I could. My buddy's like, "What is going on?" He chased me. I was like, "What are you doing?" And we're on the way to a McDonald's. I was like, I got to get out of here. I don't want to be hearing from God right now. So I was less spiritual back then, okay? So I'm running towards this McDonald's, and my friend's like, "Dude, what's the deal?" I'm like, Nothing. I just don't want to be in there anymore." He's like, "What's going on?" And finally, we're sitting there over a Big Mac, and it's a very powerful moment for me over this Big Mac, because my friend said, "Dude, what's going on?" And I said, "Man, I'm about to go on the mission field. I'm raising all this money, but I've got all this money set aside, and I feel like I'm supposed to be one of those people that gives $1,000. And he's like, "Bro, if God's telling you to obey, you need to obey." And I was like, "Yeah, that's easy for you. You don't got to give the $1,000 away. You don't even have $1,000. He's like, "No, you need to do what God says." And I'm sitting there, so finally I resolve in my heart, all right, let's do this. Fine. So I go to the offering plate had already been passed, so I had to go to the office of the director, and here's $1,000, blah, blah, blah. So they're like, "Oh, thank you." So I went home, and I was like, "All right, Lord, fine. I made my sacrifice for you. I'm a good person. I'm a giving person." I get home, and in my mailbox, I find a letter from a friend who's going on a mission trip to Mexico. And do you know how much she needs to raise to go on her mission trip? $1,000. And as I read it, my heart's sinking again, the same feeling. I'm like, dang it. I write the check. Well, anyways, long story short, God, over the next few months, systematically dismantled my savings account. And I remember writing the last check. My office, my apartment was all packed up. I remember sitting at my little oak table, the ugly honey oak table, sitting there writing the last check, my last amount of savings. And I remember looking up and going, you better provide. You better. You're doing this to me. You better provide. Now, I stand before you 15 years later, and I'll tell you this, God has always provided for me. Yeah. But here's the thing I know about everybody in this room. This is what I know about you, okay? There is something that deep down inside of you, you know God has been telling you need to do. Some of you, it's a group of friends that you know you should not be around. But you're like, if I don't hang around with them, I won't have any friends. I'll be lonely. It's Christmas, etc. Right? Some of you, it's something you read in the Bible and you just know you're supposed to, maybe it's giving, being more generous. You know that you've been really tight with your money and you need to be more generous. Some of you, it's like, you know you're supposed to start tithing, but you say, man, yeah, but if I tithe, man, what if I don't have the money I need? And well, God knows my situation. Clearly he wouldn't expect me to tithe, right? And because he knows I'm struggling, right? Or maybe it's something God's been asking you to step out and do. But here's the thing, it's scary, right? There's something he's been telling you to do, maybe something you've been reading in the Bible, and you're saying, man, I really want to obey, but what if? What if he doesn't provide, kind of like me with the money? What if he doesn't provide? And so you've been kind of stocking money away because you're like, well, what if? What if I do this and I don't have any friends? What if I do this and I get rejected? But God's saying, he's just kind of tapping on your heart over and over again, and you know you're supposed to do it, but you're scared to do it. We're going to look at a story this morning, this idea, this my gift to bring. We're looking at the idea that, at Christmas we celebrate the greatest gift that was ever given. The greatest gift ever given was Jesus Christ, who came down. It says through one man sin entered the world, through Adam, and it says through one man we were delivered from the consequences of sin. And that one man was God himself, came down as Jesus. And the gift he gave you is a gift you will never repay. I mean, you know the worst feeling at Christmas is when somebody you weren't expecting gives you a gift and you have nothing to give back to them. You know that feeling? I'm always like, don't give me gifts because I don't want to have to feel responsible to give you one back. I'd rather just keep it even, right? So the challenge we have with Jesus' gift is the gift he gave us is something we could never repay. But here's the thing, he doesn't ask you to repay it because he knows you can't, but he does say this, there's a few things you can do in response to the gift I gave you. And last week we talked about the response of willingness to be uncomfortable. This week we're going to look at the story of a guy named Joseph, who was the stepfather, I guess, of Jesus, and the story of his obedience and what obedience meant to Joseph and the blessing that came with obedience. We pick up the story of Joseph. I mean, we know it well, but let's read through it here in Matthew. It says, now the birth of Jesus Christ took place in this way. When his mother Mary had been betrothed to Joseph. Now understand something, betrothal back then, it was more than just an engagement. It was like a pretty solemn ceremony where it's like, this is a done deal. You guys just don't get to be together yet, okay? So it was a done deal, but they were already betrothed. Everything was set in motion. But before they came together, she was found to be with child from the Holy Spirit. We talked about how awkward that must have been last week for her to explain, hey, no, really, Joseph, I'm pregnant. And he's like, I know, and I know that we haven't done that. So what happened here? And she's trying to explain, well, God made me pregnant. Like that just doesn't usually go over well as an excuse. And her husband Joseph, being a just man and unwilling to put her to shame. So Joseph's a good guy. He's like, man, I don't want to put her to shame. Like it's a small town. There's already tons of gossip going around. Like, what has Mary been up to? Joseph swears he's not the father. Like, what's the deal here? But he says, so he resolved to divorce her quietly. Now we're going to go back to this verse in a second, but let's continue with the story. But as he considered these things, he's like, man, I got to divorce her. This is just, I don't know what happened. I'd like to believe her, but I got to divorce her because this is it's not going to work out well, right? Behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream. This is interesting. Mary had the angel actually appear to her. Joseph got it in a dream. The angel said, Joseph, son of David, don't fear to take Mary as your wife, For that which is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. He's confirming what Mary's story was. She will bear a son, and you will call his name Jesus, for he will save people from their sins. All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. This was spoken hundreds of years earlier that this was going to happen. Behold, the virgin will conceive and bear a son, and they will call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us. So when Joseph woke from sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. He obeyed, based on a dream. Think about that. Family's all like, oh, you need to break it off with that girl. Who knows what? She's been into some shady business. And you're like, yeah, well, I had a dream. I'm going to go through with it. Really? We've had some, I'm guessing you've got some weird dreams. Do you ever act on those weird dreams? Sometimes. Some of y'all need to stop acting on your weird dreams. No, I'm just kidding. But he knew her not until she had given birth to a son, and he called his name Jesus. Now, when we talk about the idea of obedience, I want to start with something really, really important. So if you walk away with nothing else today, I want you to understand this. Pay really close attention to what I'm about to say here right now. I want to focus on this line here. And her husband Joseph, being a just man and unwilling to put her to shame, resolved to divorce her quietly. Listen, Joseph had every right to divorce Mary. She had a very questionable story. I don't know if I would have believed her story. An angel said, God made me pregnant. That's never happened in the history of the world, sweetheart. I'd like to believe you, but no, that just doesn't happen. He had every right to divorce her. It would have made his life a lot easier. He wouldn't have had to deal with the weird shame that hung over the controversy, the awkwardness every time where they went somewhere like, yeah, is that really Joseph's son? Like, what's the deal? Like there's all this weird controversy. And here's the thing about when God asks you to obey, okay? God will often ask you to do something very specific that you have every right to do or to not do, okay? The most basic example of this I'm going to use just to get our mind wrapped around this is alcohol, okay? Listen, alcohol is in the Bible. Jesus drank alcohol. You can drink alcohol, okay? The only thing in the Bible it says is don't get drunk. But listen to me. You know what alcohol does to you. And some of you, it does not do good things. Some of you, it does very bad things. And there will be times that God will say to you, I want you to give that up. And you say, but I have every right to do it. And he says, absolutely you do. But if you really want what I have for you, you need to give it up. When I was in high school, I started feeling very convicted about watching violent shows and R-rated movies. Now listen, I have no problem with anybody that watches R-rated movies, okay? I have no problem with it. There's some very good R-rated movies. There's some good movies that are very realistic that show a lot of violence, but I can't do it. I've struggled with fear my whole life. And whenever I watch an R-rated movie or something that's got a lot of violence in it, it just leads to a lot of fear in me. And so I felt a strong conviction that I can't watch those movies. Now, my friends were all like, what, do you think you're better than us? I'm like, no, really, it's not. In fact, it's not even a matter of being better than you. It's probably that I'm weaker than you. But I really feel a conviction from God that I'm not supposed to watch violent shows. I still can't do it to this day. Violent shows, and I've just set a standard, I won't watch R-rated movies. Now, I don't judge anybody that watches R-rated movies, right? Sometimes my wife will watch something that I'm like, I can't watch that. I just can't watch. And she knows it. She's like, you're not going to want to watch this. I'm like, okay. And I don't judge people that watch that, okay? But here's the thing. I know specifically that God has called me in this area to obedience. And I remember going to my dad and saying, Dad, why is it that I can't do these R-rated movies or watch this TV? And he says, listen, son, others can, you may not. Sometimes God will say that to you. Yes, others can, but you may not because he has a specific call on your life. But you're never going to achieve the full fulfillment of that until you obey that very specific thing he's given to you. And here's the thing. It may be something that everybody else says is okay. It may be something even the Bible says is okay. But he says to you, no, I need you to give up, for example, alcohol. Because I know you. And I know alcohol doesn't do good for you. And I've got big plans for you. And I know that alcohol will mess up those plans. Smoking. Right? Nothing in the Bible about smoking. But maybe God's calling you, nope, I need you to give this up. Because for you to get where you need to go, I need you to give up smoking. Right? He may tell you you can't date a certain person that's a good person. I see this all the time. And they're like, man, no, like that person is really great, but I don't think they're the best for you, right? And you may be feeling that in your heart, but you say, but there's nothing wrong with them, and everybody says it's okay, right? Others can, you may not. And I'm telling you, listen, I'm going to say this with uber amounts of intensity, okay, because this is the real deal. This is the dividing line between people who really, really overcome in life and people who live a mediocre Christian life. Are you willing to obey anything God asks of you, even if it's something you have every right to? And again, I try to teach normally, but I'm preaching today because this is something I have to remind myself of all the time. Because God will call you to a higher standard. It doesn't make you better than other people. Oftentimes it's because you're weaker than other people. And he just knows, no, you don't need to be around that stuff. But I have every right to have that group of friends. Absolutely you do. But is it really what God is asking you to do? Because if you're not, you're lying to yourself. And when we obey, listen to me. I've seen this. 40 years hanging out in the church, and I've seen this over and over again. The people who rise to the top in their walk with God. I mean, you're always growing, right? But the people who you just look at and you're like, wow, how do they walk with God that way? I'm telling you what it comes down to. It comes down to their willingness to listen to and obey the voice of God. But here's the challenge with it, okay? Here's the challenge with it. Oftentimes obeying God will come with uncertainty. He doesn't promise you it's going to lead to a good outcome. Now, I say that. He ultimately says, we know that all things work together for good who love God, but it's to those who are called according to his purpose. And you don't know his purpose sometimes. I've said this before. My dad says it all the time. Your plan for your life, or God's plan for your life, is what you would want your plan to be if you knew all the details, but you don't know all the details. And sometimes he's going to ask you to do something, and you go, whoa, I don't know if that's going to work out. I don't know if that's going to work out. And here's the thing. That's what faith is, folks. Faith, you don't need faith in the light. You don't need faith when the sun is shining bright and you can see 100 miles ahead. Faith only operates in the darkness. Faith is when you go, are you serious? I'm supposed to go that way? I can't see 2 steps in front of me. And he says, that's all you need to see. You going to trust that I'm taking you somewhere good? It says the path of the righteous is like the light of dawn that shines brighter and brighter to the fullness of day. But man, there's going to be some darkness in the path in the meantime. Are you willing to just take the step? Take the step, because remember, you don't need faith in the light. You only need it in the darkness. And that's really good news for some of you, because some of y'all are in a dark place right now. This is the best place to operate on faith. You say, man, I'm going to do this. I don't know why God's calling me to do this. Maybe God's calling you to start obeying some of the stuff he asks of you in the Bible, to be more generous. Right? Here's a hard one. In Matthew 6, he lays down all of these the Beatitudes, and he says, hey guys, you've heard it said, an eye, for a tooth, but I'm telling you, don't resist an evil man. In fact, turn the other cheek when somebody slaps you. Now, here's the question is, yeah, but what if I turn the other cheek and they slap me on the other one? Very well may likely happen. So what do? Well, you turn that cheek and give them the other one too, and they keep slapping you, you go, yeah, but how's that going to work out? Hey, I don't know, but that's where you've got to trust God's promise that you don't know what's going to happen on the other side of your obedience. Joseph, there was no guarantee that what Mary said was the truth. What if that son didn't turn out to be the Son of God? But he said, nope. It's going to be awkward. I'm going to have this cloud of suspicion hanging over our marriage for the rest of the time. But I'm going to walk out in obedience. And listen, there's no guarantee the outcome. There's no guarantee that if you take the step of faith, start giving, that all of your wildest dreams are going to come true. You've seen those preachers on TV. If you'll send me money, all your wildest dreams will come true. Yeah, there's no guarantee in that. Sometimes you'll be obedient and it'll get worse. Here's your Hallmark card for this morning. But here's the thing. You can ultimately be confident that it's going to work out for good. All things work together for good, but you're never going to understand the blessing that comes with it until you obey whatever God's calling you to do, even if it's something that everybody else says is okay, even if it's something you have a right to, which leads to the next point. Obeying God won't always make sense. Sometimes he will ask you to do stuff that is so counterintuitive. When I was saving that money, there was an element of trying to be, wise with my money. I had saved money. It says a wise man sees trouble coming and prepares for it. I had set money aside in case trouble came. And God said, hey, I know you've been trying to be wise, but I need you to do something that's like a whole nother level of thinking, my purposes. And he may ask you to do stuff that you go, that does not make sense. And everybody around you says, Yo, that does not make sense. But you just know in your heart that it's what you're supposed to do. Now, again, you always seek counsel, okay? But oftentimes, you just won't know what the result of it. I love this quote by Soren Kierkegaard. He says, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. We all know this, right? There's some stuff you look back and you go, oh man, that was horrible at the time, but I'm so glad it happened. I needed that to push me over to here or to be here. That's the way it is with our faith, man. God's going to call you to do stuff that you don't know what the outcome's going to be. And here's the thing, with a lot of it, you may never see this side of the space-time continuum, in time here. You may never see it, but here's the thing. Our goal isn't for what we can get by the end of our life. Our goal is that when we stand before God, that he'll say, hey, well done, good and faithful servant. Come on in, man. I got a party waiting for you. A lot of times I've kind of joked. I've been like, God's got a lot of explaining to do for some stuff that he didn't make sense on in my life, right? And sometimes we say stuff like that, but I've found this. When you read in the Bible, anybody that stands before God, there's a verse that says that whenever we get to heaven, there's going to be like this moment of just dead silence as we just look at God. And then when something is spoken, it's because people drop to their knees and go, whoa, true and just are your ways. You can be confident that God is working all things together for your good. But you only get the benefit of that if you're willing to obey. And I'm talking reckless obedience when it doesn't make sense. And again, listen, I'm going to try and say this the sweetest way possible, but as a counselor, here's what I have to say to you. You're not going to get this unless you want it really, really bad. That's what I've found in counseling. People come to me, I want to change. I'm like, well, it all comes down to how bad do you want it? Because you find ways to do what you really want to do. Right? People all the time, I don't have time to afford such, or I don't have the money to afford such and such. I'm like, how come you got a $1,000 phone in your hand? I don't mean to be rude. I don't mean to be mean, but I'm just telling you, I've been doing this I've been hanging out in the church for over 40 years, okay? And I've seen this over and over again. The people who rise above, the people who overcome, the people who walk in confidence and faith and get this level of joy and that you can't see in other people, they're the ones. They don't just show up on Sunday morning, sing some songs, go home and do whatever they want. No, they say, okay, God, I'm going to walk by faith, not by sight. I don't understand why you're asking me to do this, but I'm going to obey. I'm going to do it. And man, good stuff happens even when bad stuff is happening to them. Good stuff is happening because there's a thread of purpose running through your life, folks. All the chaos that you've gone through, all the challenges you've been through, I can guarantee you there's a thread of purpose going through your life. But a lot of times the last step to really step into your destiny is God saying, are you going to give up and just trust me? Are you going to trust me? Or are you going to keep holding on to what makes sense to you? My daughter, man, she's in this phase right now where she climbs up on furniture and just calls me and she's like, hey, Dad, and I'll turn around and she'll dive at me. And I'm like, and I'm trying to hold her and I'm like, stop doing that. But she's got so much confidence in me. Fortunately, I have never dropped her yet. Right? And I think that's what God's asking us to do. He's saying, hey, listen, just dive at it, man. Dive at it. I got you. I need you to obey what I'm calling you to do, even if you don't see what the outcome's going to be, even if it doesn't make sense. But listen to me, you can count on this. Life will be understood as you look backwards. But it's going to come down to this. Simple little line from a hymn. If you grew up in church, you know this one. Just trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. This is the dividing line, man. This is what separates the men from the boys, the girls from the women, the ones who say, yeah, I'm going to step up. I'm going to obey. So let me ask you this morning, what's God been calling you to do? What's that thing you know in your mind, in your heart? Yeah, I can't do this anymore. Others can, but I can't. What's that act of obedience God's been telling you to do? Say, hey, man, I know that you feel like you don't have any money to be generous right now, but I need you to just trust me and be generous. Maybe it's a relational issue. God's saying you need to stop hanging out with those people, and you know it. See, but if I hang out with them, first of all, they're going to accuse me of thinking I'm better than them. They're going to say, who do you think you are? And what if I'm lonely? What if I never make more new friends? Or Whatever it is God's calling you to do this morning. Can you imagine if you were to finally just say, okay, God, I don't get it, but I'm going to trust you. Here's the hard part. You can't imagine it, which is why we don't take the step. But as somebody who's walked it myself, let me tell you something. There is good stuff on the other side of your courage and your willingness to obey. Really good stuff. There's no upper limits to what God can do in your heart. No eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has perceived what God can do. And you guys, you have some potential sitting in you right now, dormant in you right now that God sees, but you don't even see it in yourself. And God's saying, hey, what I'm asking you to do is going to activate that potential, but you will never see that potential until you go forward with it. That's what faith, remember the words versus potential energy versus kinetic energy? Potential energy, it's all stored up, right? I have people tell me all the time, my son has so much potential. I'm like, that's a key word for my son is a bum, right? That's what it is. There's a different kind of potential. Like there's potential energy, which means nothing. Sitting on your potential means nothing. It's when it gets kinetic. Kinetic is when like, man, I don't know how God's going to do this, and I don't know why he's asking me to do this, but I'm going to take the step. And as I do, all of a sudden, something gets activated. It's like the forces of heaven. God's like, oh, you serious? Watch this. Bam! This is my life experience. I've seen that over and over again. You just got to be courageous, man. And I'm telling you, I struggle with fear all the time, y'all. This week, it's been eating my lunch. Like, I wake up just, like, afraid of everything. But you have to move forward in spite of it. You just got to move forward in spite of it. And God knows how you're made, man. He knows your weaknesses. He knows your frailties. And he's saying, I know what you have in you, and you don't even know it. But if you'll just obey me and trust and obey, there's no other way, man. You're going to be the happiest you've ever been. You're going to be the most joyful if you'll trust Jesus to guide you every step of the way. But you've got to obey him. And just like Joseph, man, you may not see the next step forward. You may not see the next 2 steps forward. Just take the step. Just obey. And here's the thing. You may step out and you may die. It's always a possibility. But here's the thing. I'd rather die doing what I'm supposed to be doing, stand before Jesus and be like, sweet, I'm so glad you did that, right? Then for Jesus to be like, hey, come on in, I love you, man. Oh, what could have been. Oh, what could have been. That is not what we want to hear. No, we want to hear, well done, my good and faithful servant. You set out and you did it, right? So here's what I want to do this morning. I'm going to pray for you guys. And man, here's the thing, guys. I know it's scary, but I want to ask you, I want to beg of you. I believe at least 1 or 2 of you in here, this is going to be a day, December 8th. Is it the 8th? It's the 8th. December 8th, 2019. When you look back a year from now, December 8th, 2020, you're going to look back and go, man, it was that one decision that changed everything. And I'm telling you, it's one decision that changes everything most of the time. And it's the decision to say, no matter what it costs, I'm going to trust and obey. There's no other way. Right? You can't repay, but you can't obey. You guys receive that? Let me pray for you. Father, I thank you so much, man. The path of the righteous is like the light of dawn. It shines brighter and brighter. And we thank you that because of you, we have the righteousness of God living inside of us. So we are righteous in your eyes. So our path is destined to get brighter. Lord, I pray for anybody here this morning that's been struggling with fear. It's been afraid to obey what you've been asking them to do. They've been coming up with an excuse, saying, man, but everybody else is doing it. And man, I don't know. I mean, did I really believe that? Just like Joseph had a dream. You could always ask, did I really hear that? Did I really supposed to do that? I pray, Lord, you give them the courage to step forward today into what they're supposed to do. Lord, I just declare, man, that this would be a day of destiny for people here. That this is the day that just sets them up for a rockin' 2020, that they just cannot believe what you're going to do in the next year. But Lord, we know that it's going to take you infusing us with faith. It's a faith that comes from you because, man, we're scared, we're insecure, we're incapable, but it's you that can do it. So I just pray for anyone here this morning. They know what they're supposed to do. Give them the courage to obey you and to do it. And if you're here this morning and you don't have your relationship right with Jesus, and I know there's a handful of you in here, and you've been feeling the tension all the time that I've been talking, so I don't have to have you raise your hand or anything. You know who you are. We're going to say a prayer in just a second. And as we say that prayer...
Thank you for listening to Crossroads Church. We trust this message enriched your life in some way. For more information, visit us on the web at www.crossroadsc.com Crossroads Church, we're bringing a real God to real people.